Okay, so welcome back to the Insight and Intelligence stream, and we now have our third and final talk this afternoon, where we're going to be diving into the really interesting implications of the changes around third-party cookies, and we're going to get two perspectives on this. So I'm very pleased to invite Andrew Piekos, who's a senior account executive at AdDaptive Intelligence, and Pasha Irshad, who's Vice President at the Merritt Group, to the stage, and they're going to provide us with their perspectives on the changes that this is causing in the marketing world. Over to you, gentlemen.
Great. I guess I'll kick this off. It's nice to have everyone with us today. My name is Pasha Irshad. I'm VP of Digital at Merritt Group. We're a full-service B2B marketing and public relations agency focused on the commercial and government sector. I will pass it over to Andrew to give a quick intro, and then we'll get into the outline today. We are not presenting from slides, as we want this to be, we want this to be engaging, and really want this to be a little bit off the cuff in the way that Andrew and I, tackle this. We've worked together for the last couple of years, and I think we have some interesting insights that we can share.
No, thank you, Pasha. Again, Andrew Piekos, senior exec at AdDaptive Intelligence. I'm grateful to be here, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. So, AdDaptive Intelligence is the leading provider of account-based advertising and B2B analytics. We're a SaaS fee platform, which I think has played well over the pandemic, and just for different types of advertising agencies that like to work on a campaign per campaign basis. What we do is a little different in the space, where we bridge offline data online through digital identifiers. And that's something that will play into some of the changes, although there has been some hiccups and pushbacks there. I think it is something that will be helpful, our reliance on offline data rather than third-party cookies to target digital campaigns. And lastly, it's the tangible evidence that we can provide that we've reached your right audience through our transparent B2B analytics, which I think is something that Pasha and I have worked closely on to optimize campaigns.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue just into what my group does at Merritt. And so, as Vice President of Digital, I think I'm lucky enough to be considered a full stack marketer. We're a smaller boutique agency, so very hands-on with senior laden talent. I really sit at the intersection of data, marketing technology, and digital strategy, right? And the confluence of those. To take a step back, the death of cookies hasn't come about in the last 6 months, right? It's something that's been happening really since 2016, 2017. It was first announced. And obviously last week, right as we're finishing our presentation, Google announces that they're pushing out to 2023, right? Now all the ad tech stocks go up. Everybody's like, disaster averted for now. But if you have your ear to the ground, you'll soon understand that, there's certain platforms that are feeling these effects, right? Facebook, most namely. Being that we're B2B, we're full service across the paid spectrum. So we do paid social, we do emerging media and core and Reddit, we do Google, everything related to Google and Bing, and then obviously programmatic. Along with the changes 2 years ago, I would say really in the last 5 to 7 years, the rise of ABM has become really what I think is the focal point for most B2B marketing strategies, right? You've got a confluence of just different providers offering different services. Terminus, just to name one. You've got marketing automation technologies that are rolling in ABM. And so a huge piece of ABM is obviously the targeting, right? And in the modern marketing funnel, awareness and warming your audience has become more important than ever with the rise of algorithms and everything that comes into that. The way that Andrew and I's relationship began was at the outset of the pandemic. I use a lot of different vendors and DSPs. I have one that I use internally and others, and they're all great in their own regard. But one thing I noticed is, for certain providers that were tapping into VPNs, I wasn't being able to spend these budget at these targeted accounts, right? So I needed a solution that could really help us solve our clients' problems of reaching people when they're working from home. So how do I connect an IP address to somebody that's actually working at home? And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but that's really going to set up the conversation for the three pillars that we're going to talk about today. One's advertising strategy, right? So what's the strategy that kind of goes into, addressing what a cookieless world looks like and what you really need to pay attention to, right? And we'll walk you through some real life strategies that we've enacted and we've carried out with success that I think can give, marketers something to bring back to their workbench. The second one that is a differentiator, I think, for AdDaptive, and obviously something that we take great pride in on the reporting side, is just analytics and using analytics to, really double check that what you're doing is working, not just from a platform level, but from a site level, then obviously from an audience data perspective. And then I want to talk a little bit about just a cookieless world and what it all means. And, I think last week's news kind of backs up my point that I've been talking about to a lot of clients, is that change is inevitable and expected to occur weekly. Every week there's news about somebody forming their own unique identifier, and you're going to keep hearing that. So being ready to tackle change and some steps that you can take to manage that change will be part of the presentation. To start off with, from an advertising strategy, when Andrew and I work together, most of what we do is focused on ABM specific, right? So we've got an audience list, we've got sometimes first party data, which is crucial to really kind of getting past the limitations of cookies, right? For those of us that are dependent on cookies, and I think you see that a lot more in B2C, right? You're retargeting audiences, e-commerce, ad roll, which has had to change their whole kind of slant. We are used to trying to map a unique identifier to an IP address so we can confidently assume that we are marketing to that person across the spectrum, right? So getting down the total addressable market and understanding your first party data is critically important. If you have first party data, how do we utilize that? How do we onboard that? And how do we gain the most juice from what you already have? If you don't have that, what's the data strategy in onboarding clean data that you can trust is going to kind of get you from point A to point B? And in that, I'll turn it over to Andrew to talk a little bit.
No, thank you, Pasha. You did a really great job of just describing the industry changes. And I think our job at AdDaptive is just to be prepared for any and all things to come. So two of the things you mentioned were both in ABM, first party data, but also building an audience from scratch. So at AdDaptive, we can do both. Our ability to match company names, domains to their digital identifiers, as well as their firmographic attributes such as sales volume, revenue range, years in business, number of employees, allows us with offline data to create an audience for you when you're only looking at targeting parameters as opposed to a list. So some examples with Merritt Group or Veterans Administration, or now we've branched off into the healthcare mid-market, targeting even ENTS or ear, nose, and throat specialists, audiologists. So we've gone with Merritt Group from targeting public administration, government type facilities with mainly a list-based campaign to now utilizing things such as NAICS codes. So we're able to look at industry codes to reach different types of hospitals or physician offices. And then as what we do is, in a lot of cases, we're asked to reach different campaigns by specific titles or job functions. And I think that's what differentiates us from other ABM platforms out there. And I think each one plays a role in the space that is very important. Ours, I think, is more or less the fact that we can reach different audiences with offline data rather than cookies. And we're not locking different types of companies or mainly agencies into a long-term contract, which was also one of the reasons I think, Pasha, we were able to work together so quickly over the last 2 years, is that we work on a campaign per campaign basis. And if there's something that AdDaptive needs to improve upon, we're really able to look at that through our transparent company level analytics. And one of the things I love about working with Pasha, Amy as well, one of Pasha's closest colleagues, is that we work together, not just us on AdDaptive's end making optimizations and keeping those internal, but we try to share as much information between each other, which I think having that trust between ad tech partners in the space as well as advertising agencies allows for not only better performance, but I think it helps to improve our relationship with Merritt, and then hopefully Merritt's relationship with their clients. And that's the main goal of AdDaptive. We are partner centric. I feel like I, in the same way, embody that, and always am hoping to help our agencies, better their relationships with their clients. So I think that's a little bit about both ABM and then offline data targeting. Lastly, if Pasha and I are working on a campaign where there's maybe 10,000 companies within different industries, NAICS, SIC codes, and then some title overlay, we're able to go through and actually look at each individual company or account and decide whether over the course of a month or 3 months, say the campaign length, do we want to keep those companies in the campaign? Should we exclude them and their digital identifier as one BIP address? And now we're shrinking the audience from maybe 1,000 to 750 companies. Or in the case where we're targeting one location of, Department of Homeland Security, which we have done in the past, or Veterans Administration, is the budget too big? Are we oversaturating the audience? And I think that's something, having that honesty with your clients for any ABM platforms out there, not charging for impressions that weren't run. That's something we pride ourselves on. And really our goal isn't to oversaturate any audience, especially when it's a smaller one, but to really kind of find that balance between the right frequency, the right time, and, when does it make sense to kind of pull back and maybe extend a campaign, or let's shut this one off and start fresh with some other audiences. So I know that there's a lot of ways this conversation could go, but I think that's some of the most important things. And some of the things I appreciate about Pasha and Merritt Group is just having that honesty, that transparent communication, and the willingness to work together on a project usually ends in positive results.
Yeah, and so that's a good segue to, again, for the audience, when I think about this, if you're on the client side, it's asking questions, right? I've worked across demand-based, Terminus. I've worked with, obviously, Andrew and numerous other DSPs. Everyone does a good job, but each one does it differently, right? So understanding, if you are running an ABM program, how they're getting to the targeting that they're getting to is critically important, because without understanding that, you really can't gauge the success of the program. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of different ways to get to one solution. For marketing agencies, I think it's a little bit different, right? To be a demand-based partner, a Terminus partner really would limit you, right? Because most of the times that, that solution is going to be X amount of dollars, and you have to have a contract. So unless you're really using it for yourself, it's hard to bring it to bear for your clients. So we really try to stay agnostic, right? We understand marketing technology, and we understand it across the spectrum, right? From simple math solutions to ABM solutions to optimization solutions to data solutions. I mean, I haven't even touched intent data because we don't have time for that today. But what I think it's important is, again, from a client perspective, asking the right questions of the leaders in your account to really understand kind of the process and understanding how that process is going to fit across your continuum. So if we're mapping data in the ABM stage, how does that carry over in your CRM? How is your sales team alerted in the regions that they are? There's a lot that goes around that. And I think from an agency perspective, staying agnostic and trying to get as much experience with technology as possible really is going to help you adapt and understand what's out there. And then obviously it's rudimentary, but staying abreast of news, I think, is a marketer's job, be it on the technology side or agency side. So whether it's Feedly, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Flipboard, whatever it is, Reddit, you've got to really kind of live and breathe this stuff to understand it, understand the changes, and really act as a guide for your clients through this. I will say, from my perspective, for what we do for our clients, and LinkedIn's, the programmatics, the different channels, because we don't play a lot in Facebook, we haven't seen a lot of degradation in campaigns, right? But that's where we pivot to analytics, and why is analytics important? Understanding the data that's coming in from a platform perspective is great. Doubling that up and understanding what's happening on your website and tying those two together is critical, right? And then from there, just understanding, like I spoke about earlier, the flow of that data everywhere else is going to being able to measure that data is obviously, it seems like rudimentary, but we find that a lot of people miss the mark on it. So, from my perspective, I'll give you an example of how some of our clients use the data that's provided to us by AdDaptive and how we operationalize it and power it. For clients that are running awareness level, warming, frequency-based campaigns, and that we're trying to get in front of these people to just make them aware of the problem, make them aware of the brand so we can retarget them, so we can, move them further down the funnel, so we can get data to alert sales teams. AdDaptive prepares, platform reporting, which is everything that you would expect, right? CTR, impressions, cost per click, conversions. I don't consider programmatic a conversion channel. And then they also are going to report on the agencies that clicked, and they're going to report on the locations. Our clients use that in a multitude of ways, right? One, if we're running an ABM campaign against, let's say, a government agency, it's a misconception that they're all based in DC, right? So if we start to see that an agency that has remote locations in different states is showing intent, is clicking on our ads, is engaging with the ads, what we're able to do, and what we usually do, is we sit in these sales meetings, especially when running an ABM program, either biweekly or monthly, to communicate with the sales leaders like, hey, this is the intelligence that we're getting from this part of the campaign. I think there's another misconception in marketing that every campaign needs to drive conversions to provide true value. And I think that's false. And I think we've seen that, right? So that's one way of using analytics to kind of shape a sales strategy on the back end. And again, just information share. And then obviously we always look at the platform is great, but what does that traffic do when it gets to the website? Where does it go, right? That's important because that's going to inform, hey, what retargeting parameters do I have set up? How am I going to re-engage these folks? Or, hey, did you know that people are going from your product page to this blog, but there's not an internal link from the product page to the blog? So why don't we do that? And that can further inform and help strengthen your SEO strategy, right? So there's a lot of different ways that analytics kind of plays its part. I could talk about this forever. I'll pass it back on to Andrew because I'm sure he's got kind of a unique perspective. I did want to say one last thing, Andrew, before I pivot over. The one thing with AdDaptive that I love is we're able to target from an account level, but if I have a first party list, and we've done this with like 30 people, they are able to target that small number of individual people. Now, your scale is going to be super limited. You might get 100 impressions and lucky to get a couple clicks, but it is a value add. If you're used to working in platforms like LinkedIn, where you need 300 people at 100% match rate to target, it's a good way to add some of that, what I call targeted scale. And again, obviously, as that list increases, the scale grows. But Andrew, I'll pass it on to you on the analytics.
Of course. No, many thanks, Pasha, too. And I more than happy and grateful to have you as a partner. So there was a lot of things you mentioned there. First, I think for the advertisers, it's a matter of being aware of who their audience is, where they are, when they're choosing a partner, doing the research there. Is it a enterprise business or is it mid-market, small, medium-sized businesses? I mean, at AdDaptive, we can work with the range, but a lot of our success and a lot of the use cases that you mentioned have been some smaller audiences within particular industries. And again, with that title overlay. But I think one of the things you mentioned, which is very key, is how you utilize those analytic reports. And that's with any partner across the way. If you can find a way to diversify those reports, share them with multiple members of your team, not only those who are working in marketing, advertising, but also your sales team, does it make sense to call upon these 5 companies? They are warm leads. I won't get into surging and how that all works because that's a little bit different. But does it make sense for the sales team, again, to re-engage with the company? We've seen that they've reached the site 50 times over the course of 75 days or 100 times, even more so over a shorter period of time. We can look at that based on a company by company level, and even more so going into the remainder of 2021. And Pasha, we haven't even had a discussion about this, but we're going to be able to provide more insights into site level traffic and resolve it back to the company, not only the company, the page views, the geography. A lot of times companies will come to us agencies and their advertisers, and they want to know, is it the headquarters location, or is it some of their smaller locations in different parts of the country or North America? And in this case, it's going to make it a lot easier for AdDaptive to both help Merritt Group and their advertisers look at, where these companies are coming from and what part of the country. Is it California bases compared to New York, Boston, Chicago? Those are just some of the major cities I'm thinking of. Not to exclude any, but that's something that we've worked on. And some of the, topics that Pasha has just mentioned and what he's been focusing on, his communication with us about what they need as an advertising agency for their clients has really shaped what our product team can go back and look at. And one of those things, the name will be changing from account insight reporting, but it is really just a matter of us being able to provide not only the targeting and the reporting from the campaign that we're running, but what other companies are we missing? And now can we actually utilize these companies and target these companies in real time? We're seeing 10 companies that weren't on your list. Let's add them into the campaign as they are engaging quite frequently over the course of this first month of your 3-month initiative. I think that definitely plays a role in how Pasha had just noted the different topics, from reporting and which type of platform to utilize based off your audience, whether you have a list or not. So how does strategy, I'd like to ask Pasha a question, like in terms of that, how you're utilizing the outside of strategy for a prior campaign, going into, I guess, campaigns coming up down the line, have you been able to utilize our analytics or any of your partners' analytics to really inform your client of what's next? So I can talk about that too as well, but wanted to get your take.
Yeah, I mean, from a what's next perspective, I just think there's too much. We've tried to be a steady partner throughout this, sharing information with our clients about what's going on. I mean, the topic here is, how do I adapt my advertising and analytics approach? And so, not to kind of ignore your question, but with about 7 minutes left, I'll pivot, I'll answer it, and then I'll just kind of answer the question. And I think this this 30 minutes is trying to answer. In terms of how you adapt your advertising and analytics approach, I don't think you necessarily do either, right? You ask questions, you understand your marketing technology stack, right? You understand the data that flows through it. You look for anomalies and address those anomalies, and you remain agnostic and always look to expand your vendor relationships, because you never know which one is going to be the one that kind of takes you to the next step. As we move forward in this world, right, is between now and 2023, everybody and their mother is going to have a solution that addresses unique identifiers, right? But the elephant in the room is it's going to be very hard to get big tech and all these independent publishers on the same page on unique identifiers. So you need to formulate your own strategy on how to address that. And then obviously the biggest one, which I didn't mention in the 5, is your first party data. And what is your first party data strategy, right? So in terms of an analytics perspective, I would say, in working with Andrew, to go back to his question, there are clients that have a robust first party data, right, that they can provide to us. We take that first party data, and there's different tools that we can use. If I'm working with AdDaptive, I have tools that allows me to augment that data, and then I can pass it over to them in a safe manner. They onboard it, and then I onboard that same data across whatever channels I'm advertising on, so we can be sure that we're hitting everybody in that total addressable market and know that we're 100% on target. That's so important to our clients and so important for ABM strategies, right? And then we can go back to them and say, hey guys, we know from your sales team that you're, trying to hit these regions. We'll look at AdDaptive's, look at because they offer this, a visual of where the most engagement is from a map. And I think that's an example of what's very helpful. And again, as it relates to what's next, and I go back to kind of those 5 points, I just think being aware and staying abreast of the changes is going to be helpful. But it's very hard for us to say to any organization exactly what they need to do, because each organization is different, right? Each one has different, policies. Each one has different ways, different agencies. Each one is a different stack. And I think if you follow those, 5 to 6 tenets that I mentioned, you'll be in a good place to kind of, if it's a choppy ocean, you just want to roll with the waves, and that's what we'd recommend.
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. Andrew, did you have anything to add? I know we have 4 minutes. I was going to just quickly share a slide on how you can get in touch with us. And then I think we can wrap this up unless there's any questions.
So I had a question actually, Pasha.
Okay.
And it's for you actually. You mentioned beforehand with your clients, some of them really are measuring data particularly well. They're missing the mark. I didn't know, could you sort of expand on that a bit? What sort of issues are they having where they're not really maximizing the value of the data?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty easy, right? I mean, the first thing you're going to look at is hygiene. So it's, and look, this isn't to lay blame on anyone, right? It's a busy, fast-paced world, but oftentimes you'll find that a client comes to you and they've got lists in Salesforce or Marketo from 2018, right? So they're marketing to these lists and they're not running them through something like a Never Bounce. And there's no real data integrity there. So that doesn't work, right? I mean, some folks just don't have the buyer personas down and they don't have the buying committees down. So what we try to do is work with clients to understand the organizations are going after, the job functions that they're targeting, and who makes up the buying committee in those job functions. It can be multiple people. Once we have that map, it's a lot easier to get a data strategy. I'd say the fourth thing is over-reliance on intent data. I'm not going to get into intent data. I'm not here to disparage intent data. All I can say is the ways of collecting intent data are sometimes not what I would consider, and what I've seen from results, adding the value to a business that it costs them, right? So they're not seeing the ROI for it. Those are probably 4 areas that I could drill down on.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that, because I was interested actually in the intent data marketplace, and it seems that there is a sea change starting to happen. So there is a change now. Providers, people with less privacy orientated sources are kind of recognizing the writings on the wall. They're either coming away from the market or people just aren't using them. So I wondered if Andrew, you'd seen that change in the market as well, and whether clients are still getting the level of coverage they need from properly, permission data.
That's a great question. I think especially with the changes coming up. I mean, AdDaptive's focus is not on intent data. We can implement it at times, but we really more or less relied on offline data to target these digital campaigns. And we've seen better scale. One of the things too, especially some of the audiences we've targeted with Pasha, are very small. So if we were to overlay intent data, scale would be almost, I would say, almost limited to nothing there, especially if we're targeting one specific facility. So we have seen drops in intent data. Again, we just have chosen not to focus on that for our account-based advertising campaigns. But at the same time, I understand there are a lot of partners out there that are, promoting that as a way to reach different audiences, whether they're surging in market, let's say for ERPS solutions, things like that. But we can reach those audiences without the utilization of intent data. And I think that's something at least that our partners see, and also are happy when we're able to provide that same level of performance without the utilization of some type of cookie-based data set. I hope that helps answer your question to some degree there.
It does to some degree, absolutely. But I recognize the fact that you're not actively using it.
Yes.
It would be harder for you to answer that one. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. That was a very illuminating discussion and also rather ballsy as well. Yet again, having no PowerPoint slides. You're the second naked session I've had this afternoon. So
I love no slides.
Well
better,
done.
they're more natural.
Yeah, well done. And your clothes are on as well, which is excellent. All right.
We
Thank
appreciate
you very
the
much.
time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're now going back to the keynote stage. So this is the end of the presentations for the Insight Intelligence channel. So I'll see you back on the keynote stage shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.